This is the Vevor Electric Melting Furnace. We're going to take this through some tests and compare it to the Vevor Propane Furnace. Now right off the bat you can see size isn't that much different. This is the electric furnace, this is their 12 kilogram propane furnace. They're relatively the same size, but if you're going to run this, you also need a propane tank. So that's another volume that you got to keep in mind. You all have seen propane tanks, you know how big they are. This is all you need to run this furnace. So overall, this takes up a little less space. But before we start testing this, let me show you what we got and what comes with it. So everything's packaged really nice. When you open it, you're going to find one glove. Scratch that. 2 gloves. It's always good to wear leather when you're working with molten metal. A power cord, and thankfully it's a US 110 power outlet. It comes with 2 graphite crucibles, a 1 kilogram and a 3 kilogram. It comes with a very small graphite ingot mold. And this really isn't for ingots, I'm sure. This is more for making jewelry, and we can talk about that later. It comes with your tongs, and you're going to need to use these to pick up the graphite crucibles. This is designed to fit around the graphite crucible so you can pour it like so. And of course your furnace. Lid opens like so. It's pretty sturdy on there. I was worried it was going to be loose because I've seen other people have furnaces with loose lids, and this looks pretty good. And it comes with 2 fuses, so apparently fuses blow.
Sometimes.
Hopefully we won't need to use those. Now on the graphite crucible comes these warning labels. This is pretty important. It says the crucible should be put into the furnace to heat before heating. The crucible is consumable. They don't last forever. It's going to wear out. They also leave a graphite residue on your fingers. Generally a crucible with 10 to 15 times. I think Vevor could use a better English translator. I take that to mean they're going to last about 10 to 15 times a use. Which doesn't seem like that many to me. The degree of use of the crucible needs to be judged. Every time you use it, check it. The crucible will lead to metal flow into the machine after the rupture. The whole machine will be scrapped. It is difficult to repair. So if this thing breaks when it's in there full of molten metal, this thing is junk. You should hire me to translate these. But let me show you the inside of this so you can see why. Now if we open the lid and look in, you can see all those coils are open. So if that crucible breaks and metal flows in there, it's going to go right into all the electronics, all the metal coils, all the heat coils. That thing's going to be shot. That thing right there is a thermocouple. That's going to tell you your temperature. Now with the propane furnace, if there's a problem with the ceramic insulation or the refractory, that breaks, you just rip that out and put a new lining in. It's fairly easy, and that will happen, but it takes a few years. This stuff breaks down eventually, but it's pretty easy to replace. Alright, so I brought the crucible up to a heat, let it cool, and after inspection it looks like it's in good shape. So we're going to go on to melting metal. Now just for scale, this is my 12 kilogram crucible, this is a 3 kilogram crucible. The electric furnace is definitely not made for big projects, it's made for small figurines and jewelry. So to test this, I got this little stainless steel flask. We're going to use several different metals and make some dinosaur claws. It's real simple to make these, and it'll be a good test for each metal. Now, the first metal we're going to test is tin. Now tin has a melting point of 450 degrees Fahrenheit, 232 degrees Celsius. But that's a temperature that it takes to make it liquid. That's not going to be the pouring temperature. With any metal, you have a melting temperature and a pouring temperature. It takes time for the metal to flow into all the spaces of your mold, and there's a certain amount of fluidity that it gains at a certain temperature. Now the pouring temperature for tin, according to Google, is 725 degrees Fahrenheit, 425 degrees Celsius. That's quite a bit higher than its melting temperature. But the nice thing about this furnace is I can set it to the exact temperature I want it to reach, and it just brings it there. With a propane furnace, you either need a thermocouple that you can put into the melt, or you kind of keep track of it by eye. You kind of learn to gauge temperatures by the look of it, by the brightness of it. But in this case, we'll just set it and forget it. I mean, we'll keep an eye on it. Just flip that to turn it on. You hit with the up arrows, we'll go to 425, and then we hit P to start it. Charge the crucible, put it in. There we go, it's heating. Now while that's heating, I'm going to start working on the mold. So it's up to the temperature that we wanted, and it's molten. I had that sitting there for roughly 15 minutes. Now when you're casting metal, you have to think of metal like flowing water. It flows really well. I'm in my garage, concrete floor, there's nothing really that's going to be burning. But just because this looks like it can be nice and used indoors, which it can, you don't want to use this like in your kitchen where there's hardwood floors or carpet, because if the metal spills, it's going to flow like water everywhere and it's going to start fires. So what I have here is a dish full of sand that I'm going to put my flask. That way if the flask does blow out or I spill or the crucible breaks or anything like that, the metal's going to get trapped in the pan and not run all over everywhere. See, like that. Good thing I had the dish of sand there. Alright, so it didn't look like there was any damage to the mold, so I just stuck it back together, and this time I put a clamp on it. We're going to try this again. Even with low temperature metal, I want to wear a face shield, because any speck of water or anything could flash to steam, and that's explosive. That can cause metal to go everywhere, so even at low temperature, I want to be safe. It's cold out here. See my breath?
Oh, we don't care.
There we go, a tin dinosaur claw. I had to move it inside, it's just too cold out in the garage. Tin is actually a good casting metal, and with the low melting point, it's a safer metal to go with too. But let's step it up and go to aluminum next. One thing about these smaller crucibles, it really doesn't take much of a piece to be too big to fit in there. You gotta have pretty small pieces. That's why a lot of jewelers and whatnot, they use shot to pour in there. They can measure it out very precisely and they can pour it in there, it always fits. Now the melting temperature of aluminum is 1221 degrees Fahrenheit or 660 degrees Celsius. But from what I can see, the pouring temperature ranges from 1292 to 1382 Fahrenheit, 700 to 750 Celsius. So I'll just set it to 700, go in the middle, 725. All right, there's 725 Celsius. We'll turn it on. Now I'm in my house in the basement. I'm surrounded by concrete. I still have my pan of sand for safety. The flask is clamped tight, so hopefully we won't get a blowout. And I have fire extinguishing material available if a disaster happens. I'd rather be in my garage, but if you're prepared for it, you shouldn't have a problem in your house. I'm surely not going to pour sitting down though, because if I do get a blowout, it's going to go right in my lap. No good. It's been a half hour and it's still not molten yet, so this definitely takes a lot more time. Now the thermocouple is reading that we're at temperature, but that's in between those coils and the crucible. For the heat to radiate into the crucible, into the aluminum, obviously is taking a lot more time. Alright, so it's been about 40 minutes and it looks like it's ready to go. I'm going to use a steel rod to scoop the dross off, and typically people will use a graphite rod, but I don't have one, I just have steel. It's a little harder because you can't really scoop, but the dross kind of sticks to it, so I'm going to give that a try. Let's pour it. Oh my gosh, I spilled.
Uh-oh, I spilled.
That was a sloppy pour. Just remember, always have a plan for where molten metal is going to go. It doesn't always go where you want it to. And another thing, if you are using a cookie sheet like this, make sure it's not an aluminum one. Make sure it's steel, because if that was bronze or copper and it spilled and hit that, it'd melt right through it like it wasn't even there. Always go with steel. Now we got an aluminum dinosaur claw. Turned out beautiful. With the propane furnace, it's very easy to overheat your aluminum. If I crank this thing way up there to get it melt a little bit faster, I probably could easily overheat it as well. But it seems to be a little bit easier to control the temperature with this, and that is a beautiful casting. But we got to keep walking up the ladder, so now we're going to go to copper. Now the melting temp for copper is 1984 degrees Fahrenheit, 1085 degrees Celsius. But the pouring temperature is between 1150 and 1180 degrees Celsius, 2144 Fahrenheit to 2176 Fahrenheit. That's maxing this machine out. So I'm going to charge a crucible, see how long it takes, if it can get there. It's supposed to be able to melt copper. copper in. Have to compact that a little bit more, but it conducts so fast it's already too hot. So it's already warm from the aluminum, so a little bit of a head start, and it maxes out at 1150 degrees. So we're just going to max it out. But we're at temperature, so let's pour the copper. Ooh, that's hot. So it looked good at first, but when I brushed off that bronze claw, the tip broke off. So I was going to really quick just put it back in and cast another one. And it is struggling to melt the copper. It's struggling to bring it to that pouring temperature because I can still see that there's like chunks in there not getting molten. It's not very fluid. So copper is kind of maxing this thing out. Oh my gosh. No. Plastic clamp isn't the best idea. This is interesting. The first time I melted it, it did get liquid and I did pour the claw. That looked pretty good. It just broke in half. But now I can't get it to get to that fluid state. I don't know why. So we kind of got a copper claw. Not the best, but copper is notoriously a difficult metal to cast. Pure copper. So I'm going to dial it back a little bit and we're going to test out some bronze. Now bronze is probably the best casting metal you will ever try. Way easier to get a good casting, and it's a little bit lower melting temperature and pouring temperature than pure copper. So we'll give that a go. It's amazing. Copper's a pretty soft metal. Tin is a very soft metal. But you put them together, it gets really hard. Ouch. So with the bronze, I'm still going to max it out. As hot as it'll get it. Bronze is kind of an all-encompassing term. There's a lot of different alloys of bronze, so that pouring temperature is going to be a lot different depending on the alloy you have. The bronze I'm using is silicon bronze, and it has just a little bit lower pouring temperature than pure copper. Why didn't it work?
Houston, we have a problem.
It's not working. Uh-oh. Blow a fuse already? Well, what the heck? Now I unplugged everything, plugged it back in, flipped the switch, and now it works. Well, I don't know what the deal was, but let's heat it up. Alright, so roughly a half hour, we're back to temperature, and let's pour the bronze. That looked like it poured way better than the pure copper. Little smoky. That's why I don't like to do this in the house, dang it. And that's the best one yet. You just cannot beat bronze. It's just fantastic. But there's one more thing that I want to test out. I'm going to try to enter the world of high-end castings. So what I have here is nearly $100 worth of silver. 3 ounces. Honestly, I'm not sure that's going to be enough for this claw. Gosh, I know it's not. I've got one more coin, hang on. Alright, so I have 4 ounces of silver. Oh my gosh. Now typically you want to have one crucible for each metal that you're melting. You don't want to contaminate metals. It's not necessarily dangerous, but when you mix alloys and stuff like that, it can cause problems with the casting. Everything I put in here is the same thing I would put in for bronze. I'm just testing it, I'm not worried about it. But for the silver, this will now forever be known as a silver casting crucible. Put the coins in. I've never cast silver before, so wish me luck. Now, I really wouldn't want to put that little amount of metal into such a big crucible like in a gas propane furnace. So these electric furnaces are made for smaller quantities of metal. Now, if you want to make like one ring at a time or get into gold, they typically don't use these types of furnaces. They'll use a Smith torch. They measure out exactly how much they need. They have a small ceramic crucible. They heat that up, pour it one ring at a time. That's how they do gold. If you're into more production, then they'll use stuff like this, where they can use lost wax casting. They build the sprue tree and they can cast a bunch of rings at a time. But if you're going for just one ring at a time or one piece of jewelry at a time, this might not be what you want. You probably want to get a Smith torch and do it that way, because a Smith torch is what you're going to need for soldering and brazing and stuff like that as well. You can't do that with this. But if it's larger than one piece of jewelry, or you're doing some production or small figurines, this is kind of the way to go. Let's put it in there. Oh my gosh, this is the most expensive pour I've done. Now the melting point of silver is 1763 degrees Fahrenheit and 961 degrees Celsius. Pouring temperature, we're going to kind of go in the middle and say 1000 degrees Celsius. So, turn it on. We'll set the temperature to 1000 degrees. Goodbye, friend. Alright, we'll come back in about a half hour, I guess. Now this little ingot tray, I don't think this is made for pouring leftover metal into. This is designed for making little coins or little bars, and then you take those bars and you can hammer them with like a jeweler's anvil and make a ring or whatnot. That's what I think it's made for. I'm not really sure though. I'm still using a regular ingot tray. But see, there's such a big gradient. Higher up, it doesn't melt. Low down is where the heat is. Those other coins are molten, but there's one there, so I'm going to push this down. There we go. Alright, I think we're ready. Alright, let's see if this was worth it. Wow. So we've got an assortment of dinosaur claws of all different metals. Now the tin one turned out really nice. If I were to hold this right next to the silver one, I'm not sure I could tell the difference right off the bat. Very similar in color and luster. The aluminum is a beautiful casting. Very nice. Of course, the bronze always turns out very well. I love bronze. Silver turned out okay, but not as well as I'd like. The best castings are lost wax casting. I might take the silver and do a lost wax casting because it's a little bit better than sand casting. I don't have a working kiln right now though. Now this thing works for all the metals. The only thing that seemed to be pushing it a little bit is pure copper. This claw is kind of moth-eaten. It didn't turn out very well. And with pure copper, it's a difficult metal to cast. That happens a lot with pure copper. You need to alloy it with different elements to get the copper to turn out well. It melts copper. I wish the furnace got just a little bit hotter to get a better pouring temperature out of it. But again, pure copper isn't really what most people are going to be doing. They're going to be using an alloy, which drops a melting point down just a bit. Overall, I think it's a great little system. I can use it in my house. I don't have to fight propane tanks out in the cold. It's easier to control the temperature. It's an asset for small quantity projects. Typically, I do a bit bigger project, but it's nice to have if I want to do that. This little flask worked out pretty well too. Overall, it seems like a good system. Full disclosure, Vevor did send this to me to do a review. They'll let me keep it, and they do have an affiliate link for me in the description. I'm not here to try to sell it to you. I'm just here to do an honest review. And if you do use the link, I think you get a discount, and it gives me a small percentage too. Full disclosure. But it's not going to make or break me either way. I just want you to know as much as you can about the machine. There are a number of projects where this will be handy, but I think for the most part, for what I do, I think the propane is going to be for me. Really depends on what kind of project you're into. Thank you, Vevor, for sending me the furnace, and let me know what you think in the comments. And let me know what you want me to turn this silver claw into. Right now it's a $120 claw. Thank you guys for watching. Come on back for the next one. Bye-bye.